Detective Marcus Cain leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of a peculiar pocket watch that had been left anonymously at his desk. It wasn't the watch's antique design that unsettled him. It was the inscription on its back that read, "The hour that never existed." Beside it lay a cryptic note that read, "To solve the unsolvable, step into the hour that time forgot." For most people, such an object would seem like a harmless antique. But for Marcus, it came with a chilling connection to a murder case that defied all reason. A week ago, a man named Victor Langston had been found dead in Blackmore, a small fog-shrouded town by the coast. Officially, the time of death was recorded as 3:14 a.m. But the witnesses, all 10 of them, claimed that between 2:13 a.m. and 3:14 a.m., time itself had vanished. Clocks froze, and when they resumed, Victor was dead. The evidence was maddeningly contradictory, and Marcus had spent sleepless nights poring over reports, CCTV footage, and witness statements. None of it made sense. Now, as he stared at the watch in his hand, its ornate hands began to move backward. A sudden gust of wind tore through Marcus's office, scattering papers and rattling the blinds. The watch's hands spun faster and faster, and before Marcus could react, he felt the floor give way beneath him. It was as if he were falling, weightless, through a tunnel of light and sound. The world twisted and warped around him until he landed with a jarring thud. Marcus groaned, pushing himself to his feet. The first thing he noticed was the cobblestone street beneath him, slick with rain and illuminated by flickering gas lamps. A horse-drawn carriage clattered by, the driver shouting something in a language that sounded antiquated. The air smelled of damp earth and coal smoke, and the skyline was dominated by a looming clock tower, its hands pointing ominously to 2:13 a.m. It didn't take long for Marcus to realize he was no longer in 2024. A newspaper fluttered at his feet. He picked it up and read the date, March 15th, 1893. "What the hell?" he muttered, shoving the watch into his pocket. His pulse raced, and his mind struggled to comprehend the impossibility of his situation. Yet he knew one thing for certain. He was here for a reason. The murder he was investigating had roots in this era. Marcus's first stop was the Whispering Inn, the only establishment in town still bustling with activity despite the late hour. The inn was filled with the scent of roasted meat, stale beer, and damp wood. He kept his head low, observing the patrons as he approached the bar. "Evening, stranger," the bartender greeted. "Haven't seen you around Blackmore before." "Just passing through," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "Heard there's been some trouble here recently. A man named Victor Langston." The room grew noticeably quieter. A burly man at the far end of the bar snorted. Langston got what was coming to him. Fool played with things he didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, leaning in. The man hesitated, glancing around before lowering his voice. "Victor built that cursed clock tower. Claimed it could measure time better than God himself. But strange things started happening after it went up. People losing hours, forgetting entire days. Then, last week, The man's voice trailed off, and he made a sign of the cross. "What about the woman?" Marcus pressed. The bartender frowned. "What woman?" "The one in the green cloak," Marcus said, pulling out the photograph he'd found in his pocket after his arrival. It showed a man and a woman standing near the edge of a cliff, the clock tower visible in the background. Scribbled on the back were the words, "Meet me before the last bell tolls." The burly man's face paled. "You'll find her at the old Gray Manor. But if you've got sense, you'll leave this town before you're pulled into their madness." The Gray Manor stood at the edge of town, its ivy-covered walls and shattered windows, giving it the appearance of a haunted relic. Marcus approached cautiously, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots echoing in the silence. He knocked, and after a long pause, the door creaked open. A woman stood in the doorway, her piercing green eyes framed by auburn curls. She wore a cloak as green as an emerald, and her expression was unreadable. "You're late," she said, her voice calm, but tinged with something darker. "You've been expecting me?" Marcus asked. "I've been expecting someone," Evelyn replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Come, there isn't much time." Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of shadows and dust. Evelyn led him to a study, where a fire crackled weakly in the hearth. On a table lay blueprints for the clock tower, along with sketches of intricate gears and symbols Marcus didn't recognize. Victor wasn't just a clockmaker, Evelyn began. He was an inventor, a genius, and a fool. He discovered a way to manipulate time, to create an hour that didn't exist in our reality. But his experiments came at a cost. "What cost?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's eyes darkened. "He stole time from people. Hours, days, even years. He thought he was building a better future, but he was only unraveling the fabric of reality. When he realized the damage he'd done, he tried to destroy the clock tower. That's when he was murdered." Evelyn handed Marcus a key, shaped like a clock hand. "This will get you inside the clock tower. At exactly 2:13 a.m., you must enter. The missing hour exists within. But be warned, once you're inside, you'll be on your own." Marcus didn't hesitate. He left the manor and made his way to the clock tower, its imposing silhouette looming against the night sky. As the clock struck 2:13, he inserted the key into a hidden door at its base. The door creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. The air inside was thick with the scent of oil and rust. As Marcus climbed, the pocket watch in his hand began to glow, and the walls shimmered with a strange, ethereal light. Suddenly he felt a jolt, as if the world had shifted. When he reached the top, he found himself in a room, suspended in a void of swirling light and shadows. In the center was Victor Langston, alive but bound and gagged. Nearby, a shadowy figure loomed, a knife glinting in their hand. Marcus shouted, but no sound escaped his lips. Time was frozen, and he could only watch as the figure plunged the knife into Victor's chest. The killer whispered something, their words barely audible. "This is for the time you stole." As the killer disappeared, Marcus approached Victor's lifeless body. The pocket watch vibrated violently, and Marcus was thrown into a series of visions, memories of Victor's experiments, his partnership with Evelyn, and the betrayal that led to his death. Evelyn had been the killer, driven by a desire to stop Victor from causing further harm. When Marcus awoke, he was back in the present, the true 2:13 a.m. of Blackmoor's. Evelyn was waiting for him outside the clock tower. "You saw the truth," she said. "Now you understand why I did it." Marcus hesitated. Justice demanded he expose Evelyn, but her actions had saved countless lives. After a long pause, he handed her the pocket watch. "Some truths," he said, "are better left buried." Marcus returned to his time, the pocket watch now a dormant relic on his desk. Yet every time he looked at it, he couldn't shake the feeling that the missing hour still lingered, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover it.